Hello, everyone. We're going to start the panel discussion now. First, I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to join us. We think it's going to be a really good event, and we hope it's valuable to you. Before we get started, I'd just like to talk about the OPWA and a little bit about who we are and what we do. The OPWA is a not-for-profit organization of professional public works practitioners. We're the Ontario chapter of the Canadian Public Works Association and one of 55 chapters of the American Public Works Association. We have over 600 public works practitioners employed by the provincial governments, municipalities, consulting engineers, utility companies, contractors, and suppliers. Chapter is also set up geographically with 2 branches. In Niagara region, the OPWA has a West Central branch, and in the Ottawa region, there's an Ottawa Valley branch. As a non-member, I'd like to welcome you, and I'd ask you to give consideration to joining the OPWA. Our mission statement is to connect the public works community. We've just launched a new program called Ontario Public Works Connects, which is intended to help the OPWA's membership connect to educational and technical resources, as well as other members. Webinars are one example of how we provide these resources, and the OPWA will be hosting a new webinar each month. To learn more about the chapter and its upcoming events, the resources available to our members, please visit opwa.cpwa.net. We also have a number of committees. If anyone's interested in getting involved, there's always a lot of work to do. So these are the committees that the OPWA has, and I would encourage you, if you'd like to get involved, get in contact with me or Tanya after the webinar, and we can connect you with those opportunities. You can also stay connected with OPWA's current events by checking out our Twitter page or our LinkedIn. And as mentioned previously, our best resource is our website with the link on the page there. Lastly, we'd like to thank our generous sponsors for their donations, which allow us to put on these excellent events for our membership as well as non-members. I'm going to be handing it over to Tanya right now, who's the chair of the YP committee, to take over for the rest of today's presentation.
Thank you, Steve, and hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me well? Okay, so I'm very glad to be hosting this event, and I'm pleased to see that we had a very high interest in it. I will be the moderator for today's panel discussion, and I also have here with me the Vice Chair of the Young Professional Groups, Faria Manan, who will be helping us with the lead. She will be the lead of the Q&A sessions. She's also the upcoming chair for next year Young Professional Group. For the panel discussion, we have 4 very well accomplished industry leaders who has joined us today. But before we start, I would like to bring your attention to a few points to keep in mind. So the panel today is going to take place into 2 sessions. We'll start off with an icebreaker question. Next, we will move to panel session 1 and panel session 2, and then we'll conclude with one final closing question. The panel session 1 will focus on professional and personal development, and session 2 will focus on career development. And after each panel session, we'll have a little bit of time for question and answers. At any time during the event, you can post your questions in the Q&A window. Faria is going to monitor the questions, and she will try to answer them all during the sessions. Lastly, I would like to note that this event will be recorded, and you can also find the recording on the OPWA website. Now, I would like to take a few minutes and introduce our panelists. So let's start first with the ladies. And the first one I would like to introduce, that is Professor Emily Moore. She is the director of the Troost Institute for Leadership Education in Engineering at the University of Toronto. Before joining University of Toronto, Emily had an industrial career at Xerox and Hatch, leading engineering teams. Today, she also serves as on the boards as Metrolinx and Chemtrade Logistics. Our second panelist, this is Hazel. Hazel Breton is a licensed professional engineer in Ontario with over 35 years of experience in the water resource field. Hazel has spent 4 years in the private sector and 31 years in the public sector in environmental and municipal fields. Currently, she is the manager of Stormwater Management Infrastructure at the City of Toronto, and she is responsible for the design and construction of stormwater projects worth over $30 million. Next, we're going to move to Zoran. Zoran Filinov, who is Vice President of R.V. Anderson, is also a professional licensed engineer in Ontario and also Newfoundland, Labrador. At R.V. Anderson, Zoran is the Water and Wastewater Group leader and business development marketing of the firm. And the last speaker we have, this is Scott Stewart. Scott is the seasoned public works professional and longtime municipal leader with over 35 years of experience. He has held the position of Chief Administrative Officer at the City of Guelph since July 2019, and prior to that was the city's Deputy Chief Administrative Officer of the Infrastructure, Development and Enterprise. He began his municipal career with the City of Mississauga in the development engineering area, progressively taking more senior roles, and moved to City of Brampton, Region of Peel, City of Hamilton, and City of Burlington. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to this panel. So we're gonna start with a small icebreaker question. And the question is, what is the best professional book you have read and why? I'm gonna start with Emily and then we're gonna move to Hazel, to Scott, Hazel, and Zoran.
Great. Well, the best professional development book I've read is actually one that I just read this summer, which is Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. And one of the reasons I think it's so great is because I actually finished it. I find most professional development books, you read the first 3 chapters and then you're like, okay, I got it. Like they just keep repeating themselves. But this book, Brené Brown, who does a lot of work on empathy and vulnerability and courage, she's sort of distilled her previous books down into something that's bite-sized and easy to digest, and it's excellent. And she's very research-based, but also a really compelling storyteller. So it was fun to read. It was rich all the way to the end. I was getting new information all to the end. So highly recommend Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
Thank you. What about you, Scott?
Well, Tanya, thanks very much. Just as a way of saying thank you to the YPs for connecting us and hosting us today and keeping us all connected. But so for me, the book was Simon Sinek is the author, and he also gives a terrific TED Talk. He wrote the book starting with Why, and it's a little private sector focus, but I think it's very informative for both private sector and public sector. And it really explains how leaders can inspire rather than manipulate to motivate their people. And Sinek calls the powerful idea, the why, the golden circle. And he sort of explains that through, and it provides a bit of a framework upon which organizations can build movements, can be led, and people can be inspired. And it all starts with that question, why? So what's our purpose, our raison d'etre, or why? But he doesn't forget that it's as much as that's important, the hows of our action are also are very important to us as well. How we action things and how do we bring our why to life. And then I suppose, like all good authors, he reminds us a little bit about the why, that will help us with the actual work we do. And I think the connection for me was it just makes sure that all of those 3 parts are equally important. And we've been able to incorporate that into our strategic plan, and we ask ourselves the why. And I think it's particularly important on the public sector side of life. When you think about the community building and the why that you've engaged and why you work on behalf of a particular municipality. So Simon's books and these TED Talks have always been particularly inspirational for me. So thanks for asking that.
No problem. What about you, Zoran?
Well, I will start by apologizing for the cliche. My book is called Life. I actually regret to say that I've never read a single professional development book. And the way I blunder through my professional development is by keeping my eyes and ears open, listening and learning, most of the time through trial and error. And I managed to accomplish my professional development goals, although I realized it may have taken me longer than some people that took the educational approach.
Thank you. And last but not least, Hazel, what is your take on the books?
Thank you, Tanya. Welcome, everybody. I just wanted to say, when I graduated in the early 80s, and the thing back then was, how do you look? How do you want to do things? It was all about you, me, the professional. And over the years, I've seen that evolve and change into more of a, how do I serve? How do I empower? How do I make a difference? There's been a fundamental shift from that all about me to all about the people that I work with. And so, you know, my husband and I are older parents, and so we did do a lot of reading with our kids, and I go back to the very simple stories of those books, the Berenstain Bears, the Lorax, that talked about being kind, that talked about courage, that talked about integrity, that talked about truth. And truth is something I know that's an issue today for a lot for the world. And it's just something that, you know, whatever nuggets you get, just grab them and hold on to them. But I agree with Emily and Zoran and Scott in terms of make a difference and talk to people, and yeah, get your hands on some books and some TED Talks and all that, but fundamentally be who you are.
Yeah, that's very important today, like maintaining who you are. And I think these are great suggestions. And especially now with COVID, we have so much extra time for not driving so much. I'm definitely going to look into them. Thank you for the readings. Okay, so we're going to start with our first session, which is going to focus, as I mentioned, on more of a professional personal development. And we have pre-selected 4 questions that we're going to ask our panelists. And of course, every of the panelists are welcome to add on to the questions answers. And after this, we're going to move into the Q&A session. Please, for the attendees, ask your questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to make sure to answer them after. The first question is for Zoran. And the question is, 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us, especially for young professionals who are trying to build their networking and develop themselves professionally. Given the current circumstances, how would you advise young professionals to continue developing in networking? Zoran, you're mute, I believe.
Thank you. Sorry for that.
No problem.
Well, I mean, the world we live in, our lives, they're ever changing. And we as humans have been known to adopt to all the changes and improve further. What COVID has done to our society and to our industry is really just one of those changes. And in my opinion, this change is negligible. It hasn't really impacted how our society functions, potentially some of the methods that we use, but not necessarily the function. So probably the best comparison for me would be to compare before COVID and after COVID to kind of prove what I'm trying to say here, or to prove my opinion. I mean, before COVID, what was my advice to the young professional? There were several actually. And the first and foremost, as professionals, they need to know their stuff. So technical knowledge, has that changed these days? No. You need to acquire your technical knowledge. Ask for challenges, ask for exposure. Has that changed? I don't think it has changed at all after COVID. Someone may say, well, what if you're not employed? The same applies. You need to continue your professional development. You need to continue your learning process for technical knowledge. The next item would be to get involved in volunteering organizations, whether they're professional or charitable organizations. That has remained the same. Really, COVID hasn't changed that. We encourage people to join such organizations and be in touch with fellow professionals or charitable contributors. And one of my favorites is public speaking, practice public speaking. Has this changed? No. The digital world is offering this opportunity still. Nothing has changed. The difference is it may be not in person, but it's virtual. Publishing articles, presenting papers, and encourage further, which is the next step from public speaking, just an opportunity to improve on that. The opportunities to do this remain still in existence. They can be implemented and people can develop in that respect. something that is not as official but still important is presenting or publishing personal experiences, either business achievements or personal achievements, even trips. It's just a matter of getting into the groove or talking to people, presenting to people, and obviously in a professional manner. And and none of these have changed so far. Like under the COVID situation, everything remains the same. One of the things that potentially is somewhat different is do not hide behind your computer. That's what I call it. And I used to say this very much before COVID, because the younger generation tends to be more in favor of firing off emails and resolving issues remotely, so to speak, without personally engaging either in person or over a telephone and so on. This, I think, is even more present now with the COVID situation because of the remote work and whatnot. People are reluctant to turn their cameras on. So I would encourage that slogan, if I may: do not hide behind your computer. So this is somewhat different, but still generally the same. And I would say the last one is always be presentable. And this is also somewhat different because you only need to be half presentable. You only need to dress from waist up.
Just don't get up.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. I've noticed a lot of people are hesitant of turning on their cameras. I've been making this a habit for myself from the beginning. So, but it's challenging. The second question, I would like to address it to Emily. And the question is, what is the best advice you have received as a young professional that helped you become the successful professional you are today?
Well, it actually resonates with some of the things that Zoran started with. When I was early in my career at Xerox, there were a lot of opportunities being presented to me to move laterally into exciting sounding, kind of sexy positions like strategy. And my boss at the time told me, get your foundation really nailed down, get a couple of major accomplishments and major technical knowledge and technical deliverables under your belt. Because if you move off into these other areas, you're not going to have the depth behind you, and eventually it will sort of collapse in on itself. And so I passed up on a couple of opportunities to move into strategy roles, which were really analyst type roles, and would have taken me on a very different path. And I've gone back to that advice again and again and again and given it to many people. Sometimes the shiny object looks very exciting, but I needed to spend that time in getting that really strong technical foundation, even though I no longer work anywhere remotely close to what I was doing at that time. But having that foundation has enabled me and taken me in good stead throughout the rest of my career. It's just from a confidence and from an ability to relate to something in which I'm a deep technical expert.
Thank you. That's a very good advice. It's true. A lot of us, a younger one, we're trying sometimes too fast to push forward. Yeah, it's true. Sometimes slowing down is better a little bit for the long run. Thank you. The third question I would like to ask is Scott. And I want to ask for his opinion. What thing is more important to progress further in your career? Pursue further education, like let's say MBA, master's, PhD, or further like more working experience, more networking, extracurricular activities, membership, mentorships, and other associations involvement?
Wow, great question, Tanya. Thank you for that. I think there's a few factors that influence this decision that you would make personally. I think the field and the market you're in, of course, that's a factor of, what's the requirement, and is there a demand for certain things? And I also think these things should be seen as a combination and over a time continuum. So it might be easier to pursue further education quickly after graduation, but don't lose sight of the fact that experience that candidates bring to the table is important, because zero experience is a tough one as you start your career. And if you sort of spend all your time sort of post-graduation work, that becomes a tough one to handle. So there's a balancing act there. And again, I come back to sort of the time continuum. And I found personally, without education, doors certainly can get closed on you, but experience can open and close doors as well. And where's the big difference? Where the big differences come in a career advancement are joining terrific associations such as this one, OPWA, because it allows for networking and it allows for extracurricular activities. So take advantage of those learnings and the sharing the opportunities. And it could mean committing yourself to ongoing learning opportunities throughout your network, your industry associations, whatever that might be. And very specifically, it can be very technical areas of the industry, or it could be broad strokes like public works, or it could be very specific to wastewater, for example. And take on some of those stretch assignments where appropriate. And I think that was what you were hearing from Emily as well. What are the right stretch assignments? And then ultimately, I think complacency is the antidote to innovation. So I think it's important to always be scanning the horizon for new ways to develop and growth. And you have to own some of that as well as an employee. But if you've got a passion for a particular line of business, join in and share. I think it's equally important that if you have an area with limited experience, again, these associations can be a wonderful experience to build connections, share knowledge, but learn from other experiences and perspectives. So which can lead to sort of that long-term relationship and strong networks. And of course, you're personally growing, and so is your organization as you become more knowledgeable. And I think for me, not lost on me anyway, is you make work friends and colleagues for life in some of these associations that you might participate in. And I think that's, I would tell you, that's a big, huge difference to one's career over time. And then lastly, I suppose if your place of work has mentorship programs, jump in. But again, remember, it's a two-way street. It needs work and commitment from the mentee and the mentor. And I believe that can offer profound benefits to employees. And again, some of the research I've seen, over 90% of workers participating in these programs said it's helped them develop a positive working relationship. 94% believe that a mentoring program demonstrates the organization's a commitment to provide career options and opportunities. And these are important things. So those stats sort of jump out at me anyway. And I think it should jump out at you because it can present sort of that opportunity. And we see that we do an awful lot of employee engagement at the City of Guelph through our surveys. And we see that from our frontline staff to our senior managers who want to be engaged and who want to engage our employees. And so for me, I come back to, so that be that difference maker, understand what the organization's why is, but make sure that, that you bring some enthusiasm to the table. So in short, I think education opens up lots of doors, but it's you and what you bring through your outlook and enthusiasm that will make a difference in your chosen field. And that will open many doors, to a fulfilling career. Thanks.
That's a very good point. And a lot of times in those involvement activities like association, you meet people that you become your unofficial mentors, and along the way you actually surrounded by a lot of mentors and you're learning from all those professionals, and eventually you become one of them as well, like a mentor to somebody else. Thank you. The last question of this session, I would like to address it to Hazel. As your career progressed, were you able to maintain good work-life balance? Did you ever experience burnout? And how did you persevere through it?
Thank you for that question, Tanya. In terms of the first part of the question, were you able to maintain good work-life balance? And the answer is no. You come close sometimes. It's like a teeter-totter. At certain times of your career, different things take on different importance. And, as you start out, you're working hard, you're trying to make a name for yourself, you're trying to establish who you are. It's a lot of hard work. As you move on and you start to have a family, then other things start to creep into that teeter-totter. And, it's hard and it's harsh, and it's something that you need to be really, really aware of. Where am I? What stage am I in my career? What do I want to achieve in this part of my career? And as you move on, that change will happen. Have I ever experienced burnout? Almost. And I was lucky enough to be surrounded by peers and mentors and family that pointed out things. So listen for those clues that people give you, and pay attention. How did I get over it? How did I persevere? Well, the first thing that came to mind was the fact that learn to say no. Learn to say no with a good, you're not going to just say, I forget it, not doing it, Learn to say no, because you're going to have a plan. You need to have a plan with with a timeline. And if a supervisor is coming to you and saying, I want this, I want that, I want the other, you look at them calmly, don't get excited, and you say, okay, here's what my workload is, here's what my timelines are. What would you like me to give up or to switch so that I can accommodate your request? You still maintain your enthusiasm, you still show that you care and you're concerned and you're willing to help. So, have that plan and be able to say no at times. Check in regularly with those around you to make sure that you're giving them what they need. And if you need to make changes in your timelines, then that's what you do. Self-checking, really, really important. Am I feeling well? Am I doing well? Am I eating well? Am I sleeping well? Do I have me time? That I do the things that I enjoy to kind of provide that contrast. But key to all of this is your attitude, and your enthusiasm. And in order to maintain those key traits, you have to love what you do. And if you don't love what you do, find something that you love to do and go with it. And that's my short advice on that whole idea of balancing. By the way, it's with you till you're no longer on this earth, that balancing act.
Thank you. That's a great advices, and I'm sure many people can relate on a lot of those. I myself did, and I could see the panelists also smiling as well. So, I think we received some very good questions, and we have some time right now to address them. I'm gonna pass it on to Faria, who is gonna be leading the Q&A session.
Well, thank you, Tanya. So just a reminder, if you guys have any questions, please ask them in the question and answer section of this Zoom call. So the first question I have, and it's for all the panelists, what skill, soft and/or technical, have you found in your years of practice the most YPs are missing or not considering important, but are critical for their success? So maybe we'll start off with Zoran.
This is a pretty open question. I would say it's more of I would say the human touch. So it's a general ability to communicate, to contact people, in-person discussions, anything starting from introduction to staying in touch throughout, to being responsive and helpful, seeking contact basically with people, and then taking the time to provide the service and to help clients. I'm speaking about my industry mainly, but I would say the human touch.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So Hazel, if you would like to answer the same question.
I think in a lot of typical interview questions for me with younger staff is to see how well they can juggle. It's so important in today's world to be able to multitask and be able to, pick something up and drop something off, be able to look at some critical thinking. Is this important right now, or is this other thing important right now? the critical thinking, multitasking, and we all get over our heads. How do we think through a problem? How do we come up with a solution? I think those three things are really a large part of my interview process. One time I even set the fire alarm on somebody just to see what they would do. And, you know, it was great, you know.
I'm guessing the result was good on that one.
Well, they got up and left, but yeah.
All right. Well, Emily, same question for you.
Yeah, kind of building on what Hazel said, I think judgment. And to be fair, I think we expect, you know, we want people coming straight out of university to have incredible judgment. And of course, they don't have the experience. Judgment comes with experience. And so I think that it's also judgment about your own judgment, like being self-aware about what you know and what you don't know. And sort of continually navigating that line of when you ask for help and when you continue on and persevere. And so it's a very fine line, and be checking in on how far you can go on your own without going way down the wrong path, but also not sort of constantly asking for help when you really should be figuring it out yourself. So there's also that sort of judgment of managing yourself. And I think that's something that just takes some time. But it's also a part of being very self-aware on what you know and what you don't know. And another piece of that is also, I always encourage young professionals to invest in understanding the context that they're working in. So whatever the project is that you're working on, make sure that you understand the broader goals of the project, the broader goals of the organization that project is serving, maybe even the broader goals of the society. So that kind of curiosity around context, because that will help you as well in some of the bigger picture judgment.
Thank you. And Scott, for you, same question.
Yeah, I went down I'm probably closer to Zoran on this one, the ability to motivate others. I see lots of YPs and quite frankly, others that come in as PMs, and they sometimes feel that they are lighting a fire underneath a colleague or a direct report, when what they really want to do is light a fire within that person. Again, team success comes from the whole team. So that I see the soft skills as being an essential part of improving one's ability to work with others and can have a positive influence on furthering your career. Because sometimes you can get the job done, but the wake that you leave behind is horrible. And that can be a limitation on your career. So I think highly developed, so, you know, Zoran mentioned some of this already, presentation skills, networking abilities, even etiquette awareness. Again, it's subject to sort of what line of business you're in. Can win new clients, but it can gain more work from the existing clients, or honing your abilities to resolve conflicts and solve problems and provide great to excellent customer service can all lead to stronger relationships with your colleagues, with vendors, I suppose, and with other professional contacts. So for me, I think soft skills can help you gain confidence. It's an invaluable trait in the business world, whether it's public sector or private sector. And then on the other hand, I think lack of soft skills can limit your potential or even become part of your downfall of an organization or their reputation. You know, your reputation is also driven in part by the reputation of where you work, but their reputation is also only is driven by, you know, our greatest strength as our employees. So, you know, your reputation has an impact on the organization that we might work for. So I think by developing strong leadership, teamwork, communication abilities, you can run projects smoothly. You can deliver results that please everyone beyond just, you know, your financial CFO. You know, we always want our treasurers or CFOs to be happy, but there's a lot more to it than just sort of delivering budgets or projects on a budget. And I think it can influence your personal life. So, I mean, if you're improving how you interact with others at work, you know, that balance that Hazel talked about, that work-life balance, if life is going south at work, you know what it's like. You're stressing about it when you're at home and you're not participating in home life. So again, I would just say strong leaders understand that distinction and able to motivate people more effectively because of that soft skills or the interpersonal skills. So just be aware of that. Once you've gained that awareness of your strengths and your weaknesses, create a plan of action for improvement. You know, it's not just, well, I don't know how to do it. Part of it is you have to own it. So what is that plan that you want to create that will help you with your personal growth? And I'll come back to it. It might be as simple as finding that right mentor that will challenge you. So there you go. That's my thoughts on this one.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for all the great advice. So one of the questions that came in, and it will be whoever would like to answer it. So the question is, the person has noticed that at the City of Toronto, there's been people who have been hired that have 8 to 10 years of technical experience within the private firm. So in order to contribute more to the public sector as an engineering undergraduate, what technical skill set does the public sector prioritize?
So I can go first, since it was the City of Toronto that was mentioned. There is a very, very strong sense of service at the City of Toronto. We live it, we breathe it. Our residents come first. The service, now I'm in the engineering and construction services group, so we're actually doing a lot of on the ground fundamental infrastructure work that, you know, protects people from flooding and that sort of thing. And, you know, communication is everything. Being able to explain to residents why we have to shut off their water for a period of time, why they don't maybe have access to their parks for a certain period of time. But it's a sense of service that we tend to focus on at the city, and we call it our city values, and we really stress and you know, people, we love to have those technical people join us, but we also want to get a sense that they are ready to serve the community, make a difference in the community. That's where the public and the private kind of sides kind of differ. In the private side, you're producing work, good work, sound work for a client. On the public work side and on the city side, you're producing work that's going to serve the public and ultimately make life better for them.
Thank you. That's great insight. Scott, did you have anything else? Did you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, I'll maybe jump on. I think Hazel nailed that, and I think she speaks. You know, just you know, I would articulate a very similar message for Guelph. I mean, I speak to sort of a why, and of course, we need technical experts. We're in all kinds of businesses as a municipality, but you know, we speak with a single voice. We are purposeful in our messaging, and we better understand our why. So when you on board at the City of Guelph, it doesn't matter if you're a paramedic or a water operator. You better have, in fact, during the interview process, we ask a lot of questions about our strategic plan, and you better be committed to that. And if you can't be committed to that, we don't want to have to work with you. And that doesn't just eliminate techies, it eliminates some others, but, you know, because part of the onboarding is you need to understand, Hazel said it, or, you know, our mission, vision, values, but our values of who we are, how do we build a community? And we ask that of our contractors and consultants, quite frankly, as well as our staff, because, you know, you can get a bad contractor on a job that represents you, and it's hard to gain that back from a public trust, both sort of residential public trust or business sector as well. So that purposeful messaging around the why, you need to get that, and then we'll embrace you as one of the best water operators or the brilliant paramedic. I mean, you better know how to save people's life as a paramedic. I mean, that's got to be a given. But there's things that you do. You represent the City of Guelph when you're out there delivering that whatever that body of work is. So the why is an important piece in our strat plans, and I certainly echo what Hazel has to say for TO as well.
That's very key. Thank you. So the next question I have is, communication is very important in the public works field, especially for those who pursue careers in project management and leadership. How would you advise young professionals to develop successful communication and persuasion skills? So that could be anyone on the panel who would like to answer that question.
Well, I can jump in. I think it's deliberate practice. And so that could be something like, if you're working on public speaking, taking a course, taking some professional development, joining a Toastmasters, you know, those are all great things that you can do to work on the skill. But I think thinking about each type of communication skill, including things like giving really good feedback, Writing skills are something that I think a lot of people could really work on. And so actually, again, finding some professional development or partnering with a colleague to get feedback from them that saying, I want to work on this skill. And so when you're giving a presentation or when you're writing a report or a memo, actually asking someone to not only proofread, but also to give you some constructive criticism. If you see someone who's really good at it, asking them, inviting them to give you some feedback. And that's a way that you kind of are not only improving yourself, you're also helping to create a learning organization around you.
Very good point. Thank you. Well, so that's the end of our Q&A session. So Tanya, if you would like to take over to session 2, that'd be great.
Thank you, Faria. And thank you for all those answers. Like, these were great questions. So the second session is going to focus more on a career development, even though everything is young professionals and your professional development. This is more of a career path kind of associated. Similarly to the first panel session, we pre-selected 4 questions and we're going to ask the panelists. And again, like any questions that are received during this time, we can answer them during the Q&A session. So the first question I have from this session is for Scott. What skills would you advise a young professional to focus on if she is looking to transition from technical to a managerial role?
Yeah, that's a good transition from that last question that came up as well. I think start with, yourself best, determine if management is for you, and techies, what do you love? What do you love to do? So, that self-awareness moment is going to be so important. And, again, I think techies, they must consider whether management's the right choice for them. Whether it's sort of engineering or research or IT folks, know what you love to do. And it's more than just being recognized and promoted due to your technical skills, because you're starting to move away from that the further that you go up. And I'm going to speak for the municipal sector, maybe not so much for some of the expertise that others have got on the panel as well. But moving up sometimes can mean that you're giving up what you love best. And so that can make you grumpy. So I would say just be aware of that, because it also makes other people grumpy, because you know how it works. We've all had great bosses and we've all worked for, probably some of us have worked for some grumps, and they're the last person that you want to work for. And it then becomes that's the company that you don't want to work for either. So make sure that you actually want to. And if you don't acknowledge us, you and the staff will be happier. And then I think some of the other messages in this question are, get in front of management. So unless you make up your interest in management known, sometimes you may not get a chance to move up. So seek out opportunities. Emily mentioned presentations. Do more of that. Stretch yourself. Meetings, good emails are a way to demonstrate that. Not crusty emails, but good emails that highlight your skills and knowledge of an industry, whatever sector of that industry that you represent. And then if you're ready, I think expand your vision. So techies sometimes have that narrow sort of worldwide view because they're very specific in sort of their role. But if you want to move into management, I think you've got to acknowledge the value and skills outside of your department. So unless you recognize the roles that, subject matter experts in communication or financial professionals and others, they play, you'll struggle to move beyond that role as a techie. So I think you've got to sort of get to that macro level rather than the micro level. The further you go up in an organization, the broader your vision has to be. And I said it earlier, but be a motivator. Management requires you to motivate others, not scream and yell at them, and learning this skill isn't easy. And we can learn from, I mentioned good bosses and bad bosses. I've certainly learned over the years from the grumpy ones, the bad ones, as well as, that's what not to be. But what about the really good ones? And how do you motivate? And you can do that by watching others. If you're not, look, that's not my skill yet. So look to examples of good teachers, coaches, managers, and become one. And then solve problems. So you've got to translate, as a techie, you've got to sort of translate their passion for problem solving into a management context. Your folks aren't going to learn if you just say, get out of the way, I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm going to do it. So you've got to be able to have that ability to problem solve in a team format. In fact, guiding the team to solve problems. And I think then that opportunity to teach others, not only technical skills, but the problem solving skills is a key component. Of course, network, and I can't, not mention OPW a lot. Such a great organization for me. Anyway, it's been one of the best organizations I've joined. But that ability to network and have a safe place to ask others questions. I don't know what this is that I've been tasked with, but I know you do. And that's a good place to do that. And then ultimately wield influence. I think managers need to exert their influence, and techies can demonstrate this ability on team projects. So you need to get others to work with you and do what you want them to do. And one of the best ways to do that is to have good ideas, but to be diplomatic and political and how you bring it forward. And I don't mean political in a sneaky sense. I just mean be aware of what your team is going through. There's lots of stresses, especially now that you see staff that they're sort of balancing this act of have I got the kids in school? Am I a teacher? Am I a parent? Am I a son and a daughter? So be aware of that influence that you can bring to the table in a very positive way. And then ultimately, be a good communicator. You've got to embrace that idea of learning to write beyond the technical capabilities, but you've got to be able to speak and learn and how to do that in meetings. How to do that in a public way so it doesn't, I'm not looking down my nose at, who are these residents to tell me what I know about building a bridge or, developing a stormwater management plan. So I think the earlier you pick up these skills, the better career trajectory that you can be on, and you get a chance to set that up for yourself. So take some ownership of that as well. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a very detailed answer, and it's actually touched up on a very good points for multiple areas. Like, the second question is for Hazel, and the question is, how did you decide to transition from private to public sector? And a follow-up question to that is, what criteria did you use to evaluate when the right time is to transition to a new role and to start looking for new opportunities?
Okay, thanks, Tanya. I guess me personally, I spent the first 4.5 years of my career in private consulting. And during that time, I took the time to learn as much as I could from everyone around me. When the time came, and I have to say that I never once looked for a job. All my job offers came from networking. So don't underestimate the importance of talking to people, engaging people. And when the first offer, serious offer came to me, I did a lot of soul searching because it was in the public sector. And it was a really good question about moving from producing things, producing designs, building stuff, seeing it go in, that satisfaction of looking at it and seeing I was a part of that, to where I would lose that opportunity in the public sector. And so it was a really fundamental change and a lot of soul searching. I talked to a lot of people around me, people that knew me and that had the opportunity to work with me so they could provide some insights into what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, where I needed to do some more work. And, I thought about it for a while, and I thought, you know what, it looks like a great opportunity. It's stuff that I love. It was about stormwater management specifically. I could get passionate about that. Oh, heck, I'll try it for a couple of years. 27 years later, I look back, and my key want was to make a difference, with respect to the field of stormwater management, and working with the conservation authorities allowed me to do that. It was chaos. Back in the 80s, it was voodoo. You want to do what? You want to dig a hole and do what? You want to put water where? And I always remember going to square one and trying to insert catch basin control devices. And the guy from the construction crew looked at me and he goes, "What, do you want to flood the parking lot?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I do." And it was that fundamental changing of how people viewed stormwater. It was something that I could get really worked up and passionate about. So I stayed a longer time there. But as I say, I wanted to make a difference. And that led logically to the next thing, and then the next thing. And then later in my career, moving from a more environmental slant to more of an infrastructure, municipal setting, which was a big decision again for me, but it was an opportunity to learn. I need to keep learning. Whatever I do, I need to keep learning, and that has to be a big part of whatever decision that you make. And again, it comes down to who you are and what you want. Do some soul searching. Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you, Hazel. Next, I would like to ask Emily a question. Have you had a career transition, for example, switching from private to public, or like moving from technical to managerial role, or even changing countries or maybe field of works? And then follow-up question to that is, how did you navigate the emotional or technical aspects, or maybe both, of the transition? And what advice would you give to someone who is in a similar position, similar situation?
So my career has been a series of career, I would call them career leaps rather than career transitions. So I went from Xerox, where I was an industrial R&D and a chemical engineering type role, to Hatch, where I jokingly said I was the most overpaid junior engineer because I came in at a mid-level management role, but was put onto a large consulting project, which was completely different in terms of the deliverables than what I had been doing at Xerox. And so I had to learn what all the, what stream tables were again, things that I hadn't done since I was an undergrad and had barely done. And then after a while at Hatch, I moved into the water business. I'll talk more about that specifically. And then I moved it to the university, back into innovation, into the university, joined the board of Metrolinx. Like, I've done all these things. And each time I've done it, I have really not known that much, right? I've jumped into areas where I was not the expert. When I got into public works, it was because I was invited to do a review of the water business at Hatch. And so I had been in this sort of technical consulting role at Hatch. I did this worldwide review of their water business, made a bunch of recommendations, and the board said, fantastic, you are now the managing director of water, go. And so I was leading a global business. We were integrating a South African municipal and infrastructure organization. And I really knew nothing. I mean, I knew a pretty surface level. Everybody that worked for me was a much deeper technical expert than I was. So it was kind of really unsettling. And so a couple of things I would say I learned, especially in that experience, but I had learned from the earlier transitions. One is you need a life preserver. And that life preserver for me was that technical foundation I talked about before, that I had mastered something and kind of been a world expert in something before, and then I could do it again. The second thing was my curiosity. So I knew I was never going to win on depth, but I could win on breadth. And so one of the things I quickly realized, and one of the reasons they gave me the job in the first place, was I was able to really digest a lot of the context, a lot of the situation, and figure out how to find the right experts to pull together to solve the client's problems. And so that's what I did. And I learned just enough about hydrology and hydrogeology and geochemistry and everything else to be able to serve my clients in that way. And that took me into, as I got more and more onto the municipal side, that took me into P3 contract management. And again, always finding the experts that could help me. So there was a humility that had to go with my curiosity as well. And that has really stood me in good stead as I've continued in through my career. I'm now on the board of Metrolinx. I am not a rail expert, but I bring in a whole bunch of other expertise from the work that I've been doing in the municipal sector. So I think you have to have a certain, I'm not fearless, but I think when you're in the deep and you feel like the water is over your head, you have to know what your life preservers are. You have to figure out what your safety strokes are, and you have to know where to call for help. And I think that's always been my strategy. And knowing and reassuring yourself that this feeling is going to pass, it's just a matter of time. And after a couple of months, you'll know what you do. And I've always had incredible support from the people that I've worked with in supporting me in that. Nobody's ever been out to sort of punish me for being an interloper. I've always had incredible professional support from the people that I've worked with. So I think that imposter syndrome that sometimes we face is something you can talk yourself out of, and find other people who can help remind you of what the strengths are that you're bringing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your advices. Lastly, I have a question for Zoran. So What do you think the outlook will be of construction and consulting engineering jobs market post-COVID? And follow-up question to that is, what advice would you give to young professionals who are about to graduate or just graduated or like in early stages of their career?
Well, of course, no one has the crystal ball. But what we know so far, I would say 7-8 months into this COVID pandemic situation, is that it really hasn't had any major impact on the construction and the consulting engineering industry, or the municipalities and the provincial and the municipal level of governments. So what has happened is immediately when COVID started, the government agencies identified what they call essential type projects, which included water and wastewater projects, transportation projects, municipal projects, and therefore nothing stopped with respect to those projects. The construction, the design, the engineering, the procurement on the side of the municipalities, that continued as usual. The digital technology is so advanced that working from home and reduced actual in-person visits and stuff like that was nicely implemented, fluently implemented. What surprised me the most is that there was no impact on the private development side either. I mean, we all expected some sort of a recession. We all expected some sort of a slowdown in the residential market, whether that is a condominium market or a municipal land development type. And there was no impact. The houses are being built like there's no tomorrow. The condos are being built like there's no tomorrow. So in reality, we haven't seen any major slowdown in our construction industry and the projects that are being sent out to the market by the municipalities and the provincial government. So in support of what I just stated is that the fact that my company, R.V. Anderson Associates Limited, for example, went through a 10% growth in 2019. We replicated a 10% growth in 2020 during this COVID situation. So that's, in my opinion, proof of what I'm saying. There's all kinds of talk about stimulus funding. It will come out sooner or later. I think it's only being delayed because the economy is still moving just fine. And what's more important, and I think Hazel and Scott will agree with me here, is that the infrastructure is there. It must be renewed. It must be maintained. It's an ongoing process. We cannot fall into the trap that we fell several decades ago when we just completely neglected whatever was buried into the ground. And because of this, I don't see the situation changing very much.
Thank you, Zoran. That concludes the main questions of session 2. We received some questions during the session, and I will pass it on to Faria to have them addressed.
Thanks, Tanya. So this question kind of ties into the last question that Zoran responded to, but it's more related to the public works. So in your opinion, how has the field of public works changed in the past 5 years? What do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? So anyone in the panelists can answer this one.
Well, maybe I'll jump in and start, and then others can give smarter answers than I'll give. But I think, as I look at the past 5 years, I think our strive for, I'll say artificial intelligence, and whether that's sort of, automated connected vehicles, or, I look at, we've replaced all of our streetlights in Guelph, of course, because it's the right thing to do. It's good for the environment. It's good for our pocketbook. But the technology that we placed in there for our future growth, and whether it's, drive or people not driving vehicles anymore. And I'm beyond just cars. What is, especially in today's world, what does Amazon and FedEx look like? How are we connected that way? I think, for us, that's been a big change. I think cybersecurity and smart cities, and that takes many forms. And and beyond just sort of the IT. I mean, we've embraced sort of a circular food economy here within the City of Guelph, but I think smart cities has been a big change within the public works sector. And you know, the circular food economy draws in all of our solid waste staff, because we've just got all kinds of technology that we've got on the equipment and the carts, and we get a sense of what's being bought, what's being thrown out because it's not getting used. So I think it'll be that. And then I think as I look forward, I sort of briefly mentioned this, as you become better at being good communicators, and I think the panelists have talked about that greater transparency that an educated community wants. They don't want us showing up anymore, just saying, listen, we know best, we're from the government, and we're not here to help, we're here to tell you how to do it. Those days are long gone. And I think that will have to square, that circle will have to square up, so that our communities expect more, and they expect to be engaged differently in a more fulsome way. So it's, you know, if you can equate it to, you know, it's not an EA, but if you can equate it to sort of that, you don't have to take that to the next level. It's not going to be good enough just to highlight the options in the status quo. So anyway, I see that transparency piece with an educated community is in the next 5 years as a big piece, along with automation. But I'll shut up and let others yammer on too much. Let others jump in.
Oh, thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in? Hazel, you're on mute.
I just wanted to jump in. I couldn't comment about previous 5 years because I've only been in a municipality for 5 years. So I was hoping Scott would step up and get in there. But in terms of what's coming, I can tell you that the City of Toronto is reimagining governance, municipal governance. And some of the things that Scott talked about, which is technology, but we're also, there's going to be, in terms of our Office of Recovery, that's seeing us through the COVID process and afterwards, the priorities that have been set for us are, our governance is going to focus on people, diversity, equity, resilience, and climate change. And those factors going forward are going to take front and center. In terms of the governance model, that's what our leaders will be focusing on. That's what we're going to be asked to do, to look at as management within the city, is look at our programs and our projects with an eye to those 4 or 5 areas that the city is going to that direction. But it's reimagining governance, and it's a fundamental change. Some of it, of course, has to do with budgets. So right now, the city owns, I think, 50 large sites and buildings in downtown Toronto. Well, we're going to be going from 50 to 20. And so we're looking at a fundamental change in how we work. We're going to look at hoteling desks in those 20 buildings. So I will be working in a particular building, no particular desk. I will book my desk when I have to come in, but I will be doing most of my work from home. And we will, every single one of my projects, my construction designs of infrastructure will have to account for climate change and resilience. Not in just some kind of a patronizing way, but fundamentally, how are you going to prepare for extreme storm events? How are you going to protect the public? How are you going to protect the environment? Some serious, serious considerations and redesigns. In water, we tend to use historical data in terms of our designing for infrastructure. That's going to change. That's going to go way out the door. And some fundamental change in how we do designs.
Well, thank you for some great insight. So the next question I have is, as a leader, what has been the most significant barrier in your career? Would you say this is still an issue in our industry?
I can give that one a try. I think I think one of the barriers for me in my career has been perception of what is valuable in the work that you do. And so I think there has been, there's a lot of emotional labor that you end up doing as a manager in terms of supporting people. And if you're a woman in engineering, you end up doing a lot of mentoring of other women and that kind of stuff. And so there's that work was not really valued. It was sort of extracurricular for a long time. But I think what's exciting, and you've heard it today, and it's great to hear Scott and Zoran talking about this recognition that the soft skills, the people skills are actually really important. And more companies are spending more and more time with all of their leaders, getting their leaders to be spending time on that emotional labor side. So some of the work that maybe I think that I gravitated to, which was maybe stronger on the HR side of management, was not seen as valuable as the technical side of work. And I think that there has been an increasing recognition that both are needed. And so overall in my career, I have been rewarded for that. I'll call it the HR skills that I brought, the soft skills that I brought, as much as for the technical skills. But sometimes that was, I was sometimes punished a little bit if I went too far the other way.
I'd like to add to this. Emily's to the point on this issue, but I wanted to add something more of a personal nature. For me, the most significant barrier was learning the language. And this will touch close with the immigrant part of the young professionals. However, I recognized it early, and I recognized that it had to be done right and it had to be done quick. And I put full attention to learning the English language. But this could also apply to people that are born and raised here, because as all the panelists mentioned earlier, good communication skills, eloquence, good writing skills are some of the key elements of the professional development. So keep that in mind.
Great, thank you.
I guess, can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the when I graduated, 40 years ago, and I looked like I was 12 years old. My skin color didn't look like every engineer that was doing work. And for 2 years, the vice president kept walking by my desk and asking me, how was my dad and when was I going to go back to school? Because he thought I was a summer student for 2 years. And the last time he asked me, I set him straight because I'd had enough. So don't let the fact that you're new and you're new to a job and you're new to a career. Some of the most fundamental changes in water resources has been because of the young people coming out of school. And they've learned to do things. I was never as smart as you guys. Let me tell you that, first of all. You have the tools, you have some training that brings value to an organization, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. As I say, keep that enthusiasm, show the respect, do your homework, know your stuff. Don't bluff your way through stuff. But when you have to say something, you've done your homework, you say it.
Thank you. That really resonates a lot of that.
But I think if I can add to that piece, Hazel, and I agree with everything that's been said, but diversity and inclusion, so that hasn't, in terms of your question, that hasn't impacted me early part of my career. But I think what does our industry still have ways to go? This is one area for me. And it's got to be more than just, certainly when I began my career in the middle of the 80s, there was lots of white males hanging around in this field, that's for sure. But I think we have a ways to go with our BIPOC community or women in our field. And I think sort of systemic racism, because, you have to have people like Hazel that will stand up and tell people what they think. But I think there has to be allies. And we've got to up our game in the boardroom, to all, up and down sort of the entire industry. And I think this is an area, given sort of the global changes, this is an area that it is much easier to embrace. We're going through it a little bit in the City of Guelph. And for me with staff, it's sort of commit to that uncomfortable feeling of having these discussions, because we haven't got all the answers. And if you can get past the uncomfortable part, you can actually get to really good solutions. So I would echo that and just say that there has to be allies in sort of boardrooms and in management levels to support, all folks that are coming through our industry. So, I would be remiss if I didn't say that. And we've got to have allies, especially for the YPs coming in. It's a different world today than it was when maybe, when I started my career, when dinosaurs were still roaming this earth. But we've got to embrace what does the next 5 years look like. And this is a big improvement that we can collectively make.
I completely agree with that. Thank you. So the next question is, what was the most difficult lesson to learn? What was the most difficult lesson to learn being in leadership position?
I can jump in. I think, and I teach this a lot at the university. I think we sometimes conflate leading with doing. And when you're young in your career, you're doing a lot of doing. And at some point, as you transition into leadership roles, letting others do and empowering others to do becomes and I think Scott talked about lighting the fire within people. It's about motivating others. And so a lot of us, especially technical people, we sort of have been fueled by output. We want to be putting things out. And at some point, as you transition into a formal leadership role, it's the output of your team that matters, not as you as an individual. And that's actually, it's a relatively subtle shift. But one of the things that I learned going as I moved through into team leadership and ultimately into executive leadership, it's about figuring out how to work, how to help others to deliver, and so it becomes much less about the busyness, even though you're incredibly busy doing it. If you spend all of your time doing, you're not spending enough time leading, and it's actually a really difficult balance to get, and also quite a change in your own perception of your value, because for a long time you've been valued for technical delivery, and as you move into more and more senior leadership, you're doing less and less of the technical, and that sometimes feels like you're leaving that technical behind. You're not. You're just empowering other people in the technical and letting them be smarter than you, letting them be more experienced than you, letting them deliver. So it's sort of again a humility that has to come in terms of moving into leadership.
I'd like to add to this that I completely echo Emily's opinion. I wrote 3 words here: delegating, motivating, and leading. And I think she used all of those in her explanation.
I think a little add-on is learn to accept feedback. I think sometimes you can get into senior levels or executive levels, and you sometimes either neglect to ask for it, or it becomes difficult to hear it from sort of the rank and file, if you will. Again, good organizations are only as weak as sort of the, if everybody's unhappy, then. So I think it's important for executive staff or teams to make sure that they're asking for that feedback. And because sometimes it might just be clarity of purpose. Are we clear to all of our staff? I keep coming back to our why, but that clarity of purpose, is it clear for everybody? And if it's not, then they're going to have a hard time delivering it. So whether it's, I mentioned paramedics, but whether it's our solid waste operators, they have to connect. I'm in this truck every day delivering customer service, and they connect it back to the why. They're not massive parts of our strat plan, but they've got to connect what they do. And I think if we're not asking for feedback, it's, ugly things can happen. So don't lose sight of that as you move in your career up the ranks.
Well, thank you guys for some great responses. So I have one final question, and that's for whoever would like to answer. Tell us how professional opportunities in your years of practice have affected your career path.
I keep jumping in first.
Way to go, Emily.
Yeah.
I've been very, very, very fortunate. I think 2 things. I've kind of had this weird 10-year cycle going. So I'll probably be at the university for 10 years. I'm in year 2. But basically what I found is that after about 10 years, I was itching for a change. And so I needed to start looking and thinking. And that was not a 1-week process. That was probably a 2-year process to figure out what that looked like. And in fact, at Xerox, I actually kind of went through that process twice. And so I think what I found was that you have to, that's when your networking and your research is really, really important, is going around and talking to people about what you can do with the skills that you have and the experience that you have, what other things might be interesting to you, be very curiosity led. And those opportunities then will start to pop up through those conversations. The only posted job that I've applied for is actually the job I have now at the university. And even that had been a 2-year discussion before they finally posted the job. So there are these ongoing conversations that happen over time, and it's not going to be instant. And if it doesn't happen, if a door was open and then it closed, that's not necessarily the end. That experience of engaging in the conversation may actually lead to another door or a window or something into something else. So I've just been curiosity driven until the right opportunity has matched what I want to do next. And there's a patience to that. It's not always easy, and sometimes it's difficult to, even when you're moving within an organization, you can feel a disloyalty to your current team as you're thinking about moving to another team or being called. So navigating the emotions of that, but staying completely committed to what you're doing until the day you stop to move into the next thing, even if it's within the same organization, you have to do that.
I'll speak about a forced opportunity. And I'll talk about times that is probably way before some of you were born. Back in the 1990s and the recessionary time, late in the century, I found myself in the municipal sector, a municipal engineer, and really investigating and researching and desiring to move into the environmental engineering, and pondering over that day and night, and evaluating pros and cons, etc. And then when the recession hit, the reduced workload on the municipal side enabled me to make a quick decision. And the decision was basically 2 steps back into inspection, because the thorough person that I am, I wanted to learn from scratch, see how things go. And I went back into inspecting in the field before moving forward again.
Thank you. So thank you all for answering all these Q&A sessions. I know Tanya has another one final question to ask. So Tanya, if you don't mind taking over, that'd be great.
Thank you, Faria. So before we conclude the session with the panelists, I would like to ask them one final question, which is a bit open-ending. So the question is there anything that you've always wanted to be asked, but you never were? What is that?
Who's gonna go first?
We can start with Hazel, and then we can move to Zoran, Emily, and Scott.
Okay. All right, thanks, Tanya. I think I talked to you about, my earlier experience in life, in a career. And if I were to sum up the first 5 years of my career, it would be, hello, welcome. We've been expecting you, but are you sure you're in the right place? Because I didn't look like what, I was supposed to look like as in an engineering position. And that made me a lot stronger and strength, and brought a lot of strength forward. And so I project that strength. And it wasn't until to reference Emily's reference to Brene Brown that I learned that it was okay to let people know that I'm not necessarily as strong as I come across. I have issues like everybody else. I have kids, I have other things. And it was hard. It was really, really hard to let people know that I did have vulnerabilities, and it was okay. And so I always wanted people to say to me, how are you? Not that, oh, there's Hazel and she's got it all together and she's okay, so let's just get down to business. It was very hard for me to let people see that side, that it was okay to ask me how I was doing. And so lately, I certainly treasure that type of question. It's like, how are you? Are you doing well? You know, so there you go.
Zoran?
The question that I don't think anyone has ever asked me, and I would love to hear it, and it's maybe because people know this, but the question is, what are you the most proud of achieving for your firm? And it's not the personal success that I would like to brag about. It is the team building, the realization that we need to start with the young professionals and build them and raise them like we raise our own children, basically, except from different aspects, from professional, from colleague point of view, and I've worked hard to accomplish this. My wife is a teacher, so many years ago, accidentally, she invited me for Career Week to do a presentation about engineering, and that became so popular and spread out that I all of a sudden I had to do 7 or 8 schools in 1 week and so on. And from that point on, I moved to presenting at universities, mainly educating young professionals about potential career in consulting, engineering, etc. And it was all part of the team building. It was educational for the young professionals, but it was also creating attraction for them to join our industry, to find employment in our industry and opportunities. And it has worked miracles for us. We have an incredible team, we have an incredible company, and with almost every single one of them, I applied the personal touch, the care, to make them feel welcome in our firm, to make them feel welcome in our industry. And that is what I'm most proud of.
Okay, thank you, Zoran. Emily?
I'll go the opposite of Zoran. So I think the question I always wish people would ask is, what's your biggest failure? Because you learn so much from those failures. And my biggest failure was an acquisition that we did. We bought a firm in Denver, about 20 people, and brought them into the Hatch on the mining side, but they also did some municipal work. And the timing was just terrible. It was 2012. There was a bit of a mining, major mining crash around that time. And the signs actually were there, and we ignored the signs as we were completing the deal. There was a sign that actually maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but we were too far committed, and ultimately destroyed the value of that acquisition. It still helped Hatch and Hatch's business in the broader strategic ways that we wanted to, but in terms of incorporating those 20 people into the organization and making that a success and fulfilling their dreams, that was a failure. And that's something that I have learned a lot about. For me, that is actually how to recognize the signs and how to sort of separate your kind of passion and your conviction that this is the right thing to do with maybe some of the more objective warning signs that you need to look at. So as a learning development thing for myself, I've learned a lot. If I could go back and do it again, would I do it differently? 100%.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing this. Scott?
Well, maybe I'll be a little less serious or a little bit more lighthearted than my fellow panelists. I think the question for me is, have you ever stolen a street sign? And how I'll connect that for you is, so I, some years ago, worked in Hamilton. And if you know me, I'm a massive Maple Leaf fan. And further to that, if you happen to be a coach, my favorite coaches all have to be called Pat. And so Pat Quinn is from Hamilton. So I got to meet Pat Quinn along the way, a giant of a man, a wonderful storyteller. But because of the job I was in, I got to meet him. And then we got to sort of celebrate his success. He lived on a street in Hamilton called Glennie Street. And because we wanted to celebrate sort of Pat and being from the Hammer, we renamed the street Pat Quinn Way. Well, we couldn't keep up with the number of street signs that were actually getting stolen. And then we ended up having to put them about 10 feet above where you normally will see a street sign. It's no use to anybody, but it kept all the kids and everybody else with a ladder from stealing all the street signs. So I'd often thought, boy, if people could just ask that question, you get a chance to be able to answer it with, no, I've never stolen a street sign. I wish I had have actually, but I did get the chance to meet one of my hockey heroes. And so that was a big deal to me back when, before he passed. And yeah, I only got to do that because of a career decision to join the City of Hamilton. So there you go. A little less serious than my panelists. They covered the heavy stuff, and we can end on maybe a little bit of a snicker.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This was great responses. And thank you very much for finding the time for this panel. I found it very interesting and very inspiring. I hope the attendees and my counterparts in the Young Professional Group has also found that interesting. Before I close this event, I want to make a little announcement. Right now on our attendees, we have Kimberly Strong, who is the chair of the Diversity Inclusion Committee at APWA. And she wanted me to let you know that the Young Professionals Summit that is sponsored by APWA was canceled this year due to the pandemic, but there will be one coming up next year. And also, if anyone from the attendees or anyone you know in your network would like to write an article related to diversity and inclusion, they can contact her, and we will send the contact information to everyone who attended after this event. They can contact her for more details, but that can be included in the awareness corner in the reporter. So thank you for everyone again for attending. It was great. We had a great attendance, and I'm very pleased to see that everyone was interested, and I'm very thankful for the time of the speakers. Thank you again for Ia and Steve for helping me out with this event.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks for your organization.
Thanks very much, Tanya, to you and the team and OPWA.
Have a great day, everyone. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Tanya. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.